Today, we are going to discuss a very important global issue. Uh, this is perhaps one of the biggest global concerns right now, in which the very future of, or the very present of globalization, or the very utility or purpose of globalization has come into question. Today's topic is globalization versus localization, reorienting economic priorities. Uh, For for decades, the leadership in the West, the policymakers, and the intelligentsia have been promoting globalization. But the current realization in the world is that it is a more suitable practice to focus on regionalization. And there are some other leaders or economists or politicians or you can say the populist leaders across the world that are in favor of localization. It is a response, localization is a response to all of the challenges posed by globalization. Globalization has utterly failed to work during pandemics, during natural disasters, during geopolitical tensions. Globalization has utterly failed to ensure equal uh, growth, equal economic growth, or shared growth for the humanity. So the result was division of the world into very obvious, very conspicuous blocks in which some countries are privileged and some others are deeply affected by this very phenomenon of globalization that was much touted as the sole recipe or the panacea for resolution of the issues of humanity, especially the issues of economic nature. So here in this topic, we are virtually stuck in two situations in which on the one extreme is localization and on the other extreme is globalization. Now, we can neither completely support globalization nor support localization, because both of them are not the true way for sustainable economic growth. Because this is again one of the biggest lessons for economists across the world, that as long as the economic growth is not sustainable, uh, that country cannot survive, or any leadership cannot claim to have legitimacy of the people if the economic growth is not sustainable, especially after the climate change and after this realization that many policymakers ultimately, despite bringing massive economic growth in their countries, couldn't keep the track of that impressive economic growth. And only those countries which have balanced their priorities, balanced their policies, they are neither completely globalized nor completely localized. So examiner now wants to know us that what kind of balance is that, or how can we draw the balance between globalization and localization. So in this comparison, uh, instead of talking too much about the benefits of globalization, the first thing that we need to tell the examiner is that uh, why the world is shifting from globalization to localization, shifting to localization from globalization. The causes for this tremendous shift from globalization to localization. Factors, flaws in globalization, challenges posed by globalization that resulted into such policies that are now focused on circular economies or self-sufficiency. So we are currently moving towards an era that resembles revolutionary France, or that resembles the Europe of Napoleonic Wars, in which every country was in favor of self-sufficiency and preventing any sort of economic engagement with the other countries. So, uh, first of all, as usual, references. First reference, World Bank Report 2022. First, you should write the references, and I'll elaborate them later, or you will be able to adjust them into into your paragraphs. Global trade volume saw an increase of 10% in 2021. So this is a reference for explaining the importance of global interdependence or global trade. That after a recovery from pandemic, the world trade that came to a virtual halt during the pandemic days, that was again restored, which emphasizes the importance of global interconnections, that they can never be dispensed with. 10% increase just in 2021 in global trade. Now later it was disrupted by the supply chain crisis due to Russia-Ukraine war. But right after pandemic, there was 10% increase. So this emphasizes importance of global interconnections. Then IMF report 2023, global economic slowdown from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. Now, this is a reference that shows the challenges attached with global economic cooperation. That if our economies are integrated, then the economic shocks can result into economic slowdown as well. So in 2023, according to IMF report 2023, the global trade, the global economic slowdown was from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. Then IMF report again in 2022, 80% of the global companies depend on cross-border supplies, demonstrating high interconnectedness. Now, this is something eye-opening for all those who believe in localization. That localization can be a very long-term trend, or it can be a response for achieving the required results after decades or perhaps the centuries. Because 80% of the global companies depend on cross-border supplies. They are not getting their raw materials or other resources from the local manufacturers or providers. So 80% of global companies depend on cross-border supplies. Then United Nations Commerce and Trade and Development, UNCTAD 2022 report. Developing economies continue to rely on global trade. Now, this is very important for a country that has just uplifted itself from the title of underdeveloped to the developing. That all those countries which are in transition phase and they are not yet self-sufficient or not yet economically vibrant enough, that they cannot hope to do anything by their own selves. So developing economies continue to rely on global trade with 40% of their GDP derived from the exports. 40% of their GDPs is coming from the exports to other countries. So here again, localization cannot resolve the issues of the developing world. Then EU Commission 2023 report, EU Green Deal in response to Russia-Ukraine war, climate neutrality by 2050. Now, European Union is trying to meet their energy needs from green sources. In the aftermath of Russia-Ukraine war, the European Union was struck by this realization that they cannot solely depend on Russia for meeting their energy needs. Otherwise, their economies would be completely shattered. So this was a very, difficult moment for the whole of the Europe. On the one hand, were their ideals of freedom, justice, equality, and democracy, and on the other hand, were their pressing economic concerns. So when Russia stopped its energy supplies, or they were not able to secure it because of their stance in the Russia-Ukraine war. So here comes the EU Green Deal. And let me quote one example of the effects of EU Green Deal, that 2023, by 2023, renewables account for nearly 50% of Germany's electricity. Now, this is localization, and this is some impressive trend of localization, that 50% of the energy needs of a country are being met by local resources, renewable resources. So that means that Germany is no more dependent on the energy supplies from Russia. Now come to Pakistan. More than 90% of the overall import bill of Pakistan is basically due to the fuels that Pakistan imports from the other world. So more than 90% of the import bill just because of the fuels. And look what potentials Pakistan have got for the renewable energy, whether it is hydel energy, whether it is solar energy, whether it is geothermal energy, whether it is wind energy and whatnot. So localization can be very effective in securing economic benefits as well. So these references provide different results, or they will be adjusted under the different headers. Then Made in India policy 2023. There was Made in China policy, MIC 2025. And there were around 10 sectors, you should study it. There were around 10 to 12 sectors in which China wants to be completely independent across the world, independent of the world and export its products. It was in the pharmaceutical sector, in the automotives, and many other sectors. For example, India has reduced its defense needs it is meeting its defense 50% of its defense needs from the local sources. So India has been one of the biggest importers of foreign arms. So it is reducing its defense needs, its defense supplies from the other countries. So Made in India policy 2023, it was in response to Made in China policy, because India believes that India is a competitor of China, and perhaps for obvious reasons, India can rightfully claim that. It attracted 50 billion of foreign direct investment in electronics, pharmaceuticals, and textile sectors since 2020. Since 2020, due to Made in India policy, India attracted $50 billion of foreign direct investment, with a goal to reduce import dependency by 15% by 2025. Now, India aims to reduce its dependency by 2025 by 15%. US Bureau of Labor Statistics 2022. US reshoring movement. This is another very important move towards localization, in which the world's biggest economy is again realizing that uncontrolled, unchecked globalization and the resultant dependency created by economic dependency created by this globalization can be a significant challenge to economic sustainability of USA. So US policy of reshoring movement resulted in a 70% increase in domestic manufacturing investment from 2019 to 2022. From 2019 to 2022, all of the American investors started to invest within their countries instead of investing in other countries. So 70% increase in domestic manufacturing investment. Because US wants to, just like other countries, other economies, US wants to prevent its dependency on the other economies, especially China, South Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, and some other countries. ADB report 2023. 15% rise in trade. Sorry. 15% rise in trade within Asia since 2019. Now, this is, in fact, emphasizing the importance of movement of the countries from globalization to regionalization. I think we have discussed some lot of facts about localization, about globalization. So now we will talk about the issue at hand. First of all, understanding the terms globalization and localization. You should talk about localization, and localization means that a country is trying to support small and medium businesses. A country is trying to multiply its options of supply of different things. So supply chain diversification, that is also localization. A country is trying to restore its lost sovereignty due to unchecked globalization. And a country is trying to ensure economic sustainability, because as long as we are dependent on the world for economic growth, our economic growth is connected with the economic conditions in the other world that can have some serious consequences during emergencies, during pandemics, during wars, and during challenges posed by climate change. So sustainability and protecting local businesses and economic growth, of course. So this is localization. Causes for shift towards localization. Why the world is moving from globalization to localization, or at least favoring controlled localization, if not complete localization. First of all, reduced carbon footprints. As long as we are globalized, our the climate change would never be eradicated completely, because the big countries, especially the developed economies, they are responsible for climate change, and they are not feeling accountable in front of the underdeveloped world. And I believe this demand of loss and damage fund would go in drain. The developing world won't be able to secure such type of loss and damage fund. So the developing or underdeveloped world now is realizing that this globalization needs to be checked. This uncontrolled activity of big corporations and multinational companies at our soul need to be stopped. This is one thing. Secondly, if we would try to recycle our resources, that would again result in two things. First, recycling would result in reduced climate change, and second, it would result in optimal use of our own local resources. So instead of getting things from other countries, if we are using our local resources, that would also be beneficial for climate mitigation and adaptation. So first thing is a reduced carbon footprint. Second, avoiding economic shocks and supply chain disruptions. I talked about supply chain disruptions in detail in previous lecture. So economic shocks, there are the shock of 2008, or the supply chain disruptions during Russia-Ukraine war, or the pandemic, or any other issues, climate change related issues, or simply the trade wars. Even trade war between two giants, US and China, impacted the economy of the whole world. So this is something really agonizing, that war between two countries is impacting economies of the whole world that have perfectly nothing to do with that war. So this is the level of economic integration. So if a country wants to avoid economic shocks and supply chain disruptions, then localization is the answer. Or drifting away from globalization and getting closer to localization would be the response. Then macroeconomic stability and sustainable economic growth. Now, whenever the economy of a country is completely connected with the economy with the economies of the other countries, multiple countries, the sustainability would automatically be affected. Then macroeconomic stability again is a problem for the developing world. Globalization supported, protected, promoted, uh, and defended by the West has not been a win-win situation for the third world. The third world was a loser in this game of trade. Uh, and there are hardly a few countries that successfully reap the advantages of globalization. So, macroeconomic stability becomes a really difficult task for the underdeveloped world, because the system is naturally, inherently, fundamentally unequal. Pakistan is if Pakistan is trading with US or Germany or UK or even China or even India, we cannot hope to get equal benefits from this exchange. So macroeconomic stability, for example, Pakistan is importing fuel from other countries. Now, if the prices of fuel rise in other countries, so we cannot control inflation. We cannot control slowdown of our manufacturing. We cannot, and during pandemics or other issues, there are many issues that the economy of a country will confront. So macroeconomic stability comes only when we are benefiting from the economic engagement, and we are not just benefiting, but we are enjoying greater benefits from the trade, which is not possible for the third world if they are completely dependent on the other economies. Then reducing intrastate inequality and promoting small businesses. Now, again, this globalization has, as I said, resulted into economic inequality. So as long as, and not just for the states, within states as well. For example, the small scale, the low skilled workers in US are complaining that globalization has created inequality. And that's true that those that are not, the small scale businesses and low skilled workers are facing the issues of unemployment due to global interconnections. So if a country wants to protect its people from unemployment and inequality, economic inequality, intra and interstate economic inequality, then localization is an answer. Then preventing inflationary pressures, I talked about that. Stemming hyper-nationalistic and populist sentiments by greater economic self-reliance and national sovereignty. Now, this is a popular slogan in the hands of populists or demagogic leaders, that they have surrendered their sovereignty at the hands of globalization. And those leaders have created political polarization. They have hijacked the democracies, they have hijacked the political system, they have utterly affected the accountability processes of the countries and the overall political environment in multiple states. So localization is a crucial response at the part of honest leaders to check the tide of such kind of leaders, populist leaders. You can control populist sentiments. You can control nationalist sentiments if you are trying to be self-reliant. So all the honest leaders, all the good leaders across the world, this is for them. This is a very good way to to control the menace of populism and hypernationalism. That if we are producing things locally, then all the moral ground and all the legitimacy of the populist leaders would fall if localization is adopted. Why globalization should not and cannot be completely avoided? Globalization, now this is a counter, the other side of the story, that complete localization can never be an answer to the issues of the developing world or even the developed world. Why globalization should not and cannot be completely avoided? इसको मुकम्मल तौर पे तो अडॉप्ट नहीं अवॉइड नहीं किया जा सकता, इसको किसी हद तक रहना भी पड़ेगा. Difference of natural resources and raw materials. This is one thing, that all countries in the world are blessed with the different kind of natural resources which make them unique as well as vulnerable. They are unique because that would benefit, those resources would benefit those countries, and they're vulnerable because they have not got all kind of resources, so they are still dependent on the other world. That is the first thing that proves that complete localization is not an answer. So difference of natural resources and raw materials. Then lack of innovation and technological means for self-sufficiency in the developing world. Developing world, lack of innovation and technological means for self-sufficiency in the developing world. Now, how can Afghanistan or Niger or Sudan or Somalia or some country in Latin America or some other country in Africa, sub-Saharan country or in Africa, or any small state in Asia can hope to completely become localized when it lacks innovation and technological growth? So for bringing innovation and technological growth, it would perhaps take centuries to achieve the required results in which a country would become self-sufficient. So that is another constraint that binds us to stay as a state of this globalized world, and we cannot live in a shell. Then there is another problem due to which the world cannot completely move towards localization, and that is managing effects of hostility. Managing effects of hostility and competition by division of world into economic blocks. Managing effects of hostility and competition by division of world into economic blocks. So this is what the world is experiencing right now. If the world is moving towards regionalization or localization, then the world would surely be divided into multiple hostile blocks that would naturally result into a lot of competition. And the world, even different blocks cannot stay in isolation from each other. So if a country wants to live in this globalized world and want to meet its economic or other needs, because it's not just economy, there are many other connected things. So if a country wants to protect it economically and politically, then the effects of hostility and competition by division of world into economic blocks, that needs to be countered, which means we cannot hope for staying completely localized. Then lack of trained human resource and technical expertise, that is another aspect, due to poverty, due to flawed education system, due to uh, issues for gender, lack of empowerment of gender, due to lack of development of the manufacturing, or due to lack of training of the human resource according to the required standards in the world. For example, economic human resource in many countries is unable to meet the requirements of those countries. That is why we are going for exports. That is why we are exporting many things. If human resource in all the states, especially the underdeveloped states, is able to produce everything, that then there would perfectly be no need for globalization. But as that is not there due to political instability and many other factors, trained human resource and technical expertise that would need centuries for many states to actually realize. Then climate induced disasters and need for global economic cooperation. All of the world is facing the issue of climate change and natural disasters. If we design our economic policies in this manner, that we are completely self-sufficient, then perhaps no state in the world is immune to the issues of climate change. And God forbids another flood comes in Pakistan faces another earthquake, or any state, especially the top 10 states that are vulnerable to the issues of climate change, more vulnerable. If any natural disasters come, the essential supplies of food, cereals, or medicine, or required infrastructure, uh, and many other things. We need those things from other countries. So local production cannot meet our needs in times of crisis. And the COVID-19 was a peculiar example when many countries across the world were taking vaccines from other countries. So again, uh, climate change is a serious concern that is a serious bottleneck in the way of localization. Then issues of regional hostility and need for diverse options of trade. Now, what if Pakistan wants to at least become regionalized instead of completely localized? But Pakistan have issues with India. That is our immediate partner. Pakistan cannot hope to get many things from Afghanistan. India has almost dispute, at least disputes of its border bodies with almost all states in its neighborhood, including Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan. So if what if the region in itself is having a lot of issues? So that is one reason, because of our hostility with India, or because of constraints of many resources in other countries of the SAARC, we are compelled to move towards Europe, America, or China. So what if the region in itself is having a lot of political issues or geopolitical issues, or it is actually experiencing war like situation? So regional hostility and a need for diverse options is another factor. We need diverse options for exports as well as imports. Now, how can we balance localization with globalization in order to not just completely depend upon the on globalization, or the other word, and not limited, direly limited by this flawed conception that we can do everything by our own? So how can we balance localization with globalization? The first thing is that small business and local industries. That is the first thing. If even if a country is globalized, we still need to protect local businesses, because ultimately, small business and local industries, protecting small businesses is the biggest way to eradicate economic inequality in a state and ensure sustainable economic growth. Then we need to invest in digital infrastructure. That is again very important, that digitalization is the new reality of the world. And if we want to, uh, competition is something else. If we want just to survive in the modern world, we need to invest in digitalization. Then regional trade agreements. Instead of complete localization, we should become at least we should at least focus on regionalization. If we are successful at regionalization, then we can think about complete globalization as well. But the priority for the underdeveloped world is regionalization. It is way better for Pakistan to trade with its region uh, than trading with some distant countries of Europe or America. Then human development with special focus on modern education. That was perhaps the biggest constraint. If we would have got trained human resource, we would not have been that dependent on the other world. So human development with special focus on modern education is a very important policy response to the issues to the challenges posed by globalization. So this the globalization and localization can be balanced by investing on human resource, because if our human resource is trained, we are ready for globalization as well. Our human resource For our human resource, the employment opportunities in the whole world would be open. Second point, digital infrastructure. We need to invest on that. Then progressive leadership and true democracy with a vision of national prosperity and development. We need true democracy. Only true democracy would be able to bring wise, nationalistic, honest leadership. And only honest leadership can have that power, can have that political will, and can have that vision. So we need visionary and honest leadership through sound democracy. Only those leaders across the world that who were sincere to their nations, they brought these massive revolutions, that they protected their businesses, and they invested on education, they curbed corruption, they brought true democracy, they brought holistic economic growth, they went for economic justice. So this is how those countries, by dint of education and by dint of strong accountability and efficient policy making, became resilient and less dependent on the other world. An example is all of the developed states in Asia. They they were of the same economic capabilities, or they were facing the same economic and political challenges as are faced by Pakistan. But they have outperformed Pakistan in almost all respects because of the honest leadership. We need that kind of leadership. And then localization instead of globalization or localization. That is the last point, that we need to be localized. At the same time, we need to be stay globalized, and at the same time, we need to focus on our local capabilities. So in this way, we are neither becoming completely localized nor becoming completely globalized, which is called uh, act locally, think globally, or think globally, act locally. This is the last point. This is how we can balance localization with globalization. Any questions?